Welcome again to Reflections on the Community and its Cultures. This time around, a look at an area co-op produce program and some personal career and retirement reflections from a guest. Later, Bob Wullenscheider will talk about his reasons for retiring in independence and his pre-retirement career. First up, Cheryl McMillan and Marianne Garner will discuss the co-op produce program that's now in Caney and will be spreading, folks. That's coming up on Reflections. Reflections continues now as we welcome to the program Robert Wullenscheider, also known as Bob, and also known as, don't even try to spell his last name, who's here to talk about it.
I'm used to that.
Yes, indeed. We're here to talk about, well, a variety of things connected with Bob's life, and I cheated a little bit, I'll admit. We met on the street today, on the downtown sidewalk, and said, what are we going to talk about? And we got that all straightened out. Basically, the story kind of starts with Robert Wullenscheider, who spent a good chunk of his life in Independence and then a good chunk in a bunch of other different places, and then sort of coming back to Independence and making the decision that this was it.
Yes.
This was the retirement village.
I was born in Coffeyville, but I grew up in Independence and attended local schools, went away, came back, went away, came back.
Happens that way, doesn't it?
Finally came back to stay in 2002.
Okay. And did you, again, I was trying to recall our conversation from earlier today, did you come back and then think, well, yeah, this is the place, or did you kind of make that decision on the road?
No, I made the decision to move back to my hometown from where I was, which was Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was a big decision to relocate that I undertook, but I wanted to come home to be closer to family. And when I learned that the Good Citizens of Independence had passed a quality of life initiative and were funding a new library and a swimming pool and memorial hall, that to me was a good recommendation that it was time to come home. And I really have no complaints.
And so, as I say, that sort of starts the conversation then. The sort of, by golly, I'm here to retire and I'm here to stay back in home. While before you made that back in, and a little while since you've been here too, how did you support yourself?
Oh, I was a registered nurse. I started as an orderly at Mercy Hospital when I was a senior in high school, which was 1964. Nobody suggested I consider nursing as a career, and it wasn't until 1976 at the age of 30 that I graduated from nursing school.
Let's just talk just briefly about nursing school. How much education is involved in nursing school? Of course, I'm sure it varies according to where you're involved.
It varies, and I'm actually a graduate of what was then called a diploma program, meaning I took all my training in a community college for academic classes and at a hospital in Spokane, Washington for my clinical. Diploma programs have fallen by the wayside now. Nurses are educated either at the community college level or at the baccalaureate level or graduate school beyond that.
And there are, speaking of levels, there are levels of being a nurse, correct? Is
well,
that right?
yeah, there are levels, but at the same time, once you graduate from an accredited nursing school and pass your licensure exam, you're an RN. You're a registered nurse, whether you have a diploma or a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree.
Okay. And what was the field that you either started in or wound up in, or both?
I was going to be the world's greatest critical care nurse, and I wound up in psychiatric nursing.
And how did that happen?
Well,
I mean, that sounds like a pretty radical change in course.
Life has a way of working out. It's curious because when I also worked in nursing homes, which I had not anticipated doing, I learned somewhere along the way that even though my background was in taking care of patients in critical care areas and in the emergency room, that I was actually better suited to caring for people with chronic diseases. And from nursing homes, I went to the state hospital in Topeka, where I worked as a psychiatric nurse on the night shift. And,
For how long?
Oh my, better part of 10 years.
Wow.
It's curious though, because every place I've worked as a psychiatric nurse has since closed.
Oh, really?
Because there are fewer opportunities for inpatient psychiatric treatment.
Just a diminution of facilities?
Oh yes, I mean we've lost.
I mean, the need certainly hasn't diminished.
No, the need is there. The need is there. But
is that one area that needs to be reattended
well,
to?
It does, especially when you consider. I have a friend who works for the works at the Army hospital in Fort Riley, and she specializes. She's a career psychiatric nurse, and she specializes in people with traumatic brain injury, veterans, and post-traumatic stress disorder. However, not every community where a veteran might live necessarily has the capacity to do anything beyond outpatient treatment. And there are sometimes crises that require hospitalization.
Yeah.
And there are fewer choices now.
Yeah. So you spent 32 years.
The better part of 32 years.
And some of it was better than others, I'm sure. But anyway, 30-some years as RN, primarily in psychiatric settings and things like that.
Inpatient psychiatric.
Okay, like working in
hospitals, in psychiatric units, in general hospitals, or in the state hospital at Topeka.
Okay.
I did have a brief hiatus when I went back to school to finish my college degree and worked in a medical library.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of stayed close. And I know part of your checkered past also, you put in some years in local radio.
Oh, yes.
As you know, again, if you walk down the streets of Independence, Kansas and say, did you ever work at KIND? The third person will say yes.
Everybody I know has worked at KIND.
So you worked as an RN in Topeka.
In Topeka.
And where else?
And at Coffeyville Regional Medical Center in Coffeyville before their unit closed. And a couple of other brief tenures. I tried my hand at corrections nursing. I was not cut out for it.
That
was not cut out for it.
Hard duty.
But I'd also worked with the developmentally disabled. The last position I had before I retired was with the developmentally disabled in the community rather than in hospitals.
Real briefly, we want to talk about some other things, what you've been doing in your retirement and continuing to do. A question I haven't asked, and of course it occurred to me, a guy in nursing.
Oh, yes.
How rare is that? I mean, are
it's
there...
still rare.
Okay.
It's still rare. The percentage of the percentage of nurses who are men has not changed that much in the 32 years since I graduated. Still not more than about 5% of men, 5% of nurses are men.
Why, do you suppose? I mean, I know you make big money.
Well, I made a good living as a nurse. I can't complain.
Made a living anyway, yeah.
But at the same time, a lot of it is societal. The fact that men were coming back from Vietnam in the late 60s, early 70s, opened up the career to men more than it had before.
Put in time as medics.
They had the combat experience of taking care of sick and wounded patients, but they didn't have the academic background or the licensure.
Right.
And so that's about the time I went back to school and went to nursing school.
In your retirement here now, frequently, you now are just sitting back doing nothing, right? You're involved in a lot. You're involved in quite a few things in the community.
Well, I have been involved with CUF, which is the Community United Feeding Friends, and I've also been involved since I retired.
Briefly, what is that?
CUF is a weekly free meal for the community at the Episcopal Church at 6 o'clock on Thursday evenings.
Okay.
It's an affiliation of 12 Christian churches who host the meals. There are no income guidelines, no no, come and eat without cost.
Okay.
Yes.
And then also you're involved in another eating type program, right?
Well, we have a senior day luncheon
Oh.
and program on the third Thursday of every month at the Wesley Center.
Okay.
And in fact, we're having a program this month sponsored by the library.
Uh-huh.
So that has a way of coming together.
Yeah. And also quite recently you've kind of gotten involved as a cab driver too a little bit.
I started out at age 11 delivering papers for the Reporter, and now at age 65 I'm delivering prescriptions for a local pharmacy. So
Yeah.
I was just had a 32-year interruption as a nurse.
Just took a little break.
Yeah.
Just took a little break, did a
Yeah.
few other things and stuff like that. It sounds like the years you put in nursing, it sounds like you found them worthwhile. I mean,
Oh, yes.
You can't do anything for that long without
Oh,
it.
no. And I certainly had ups and downs, certainly had crises as far as I can attest to burnout being a very real phenomenon for nurses. I came and went, I changed jobs, but now that I can look back on my career from the perspective of having finished it, no, nothing else I can imagine having done would have been as challenging or rewarding as nursing.
Is it something that you would or have recommended to
Oh,
other
yes.
folks?
I always encourage, I meet mostly young ladies, but then sometimes a young man who are starting out their education for nursing, and I always encourage them. I'd be available as a mentor. Try to smooth the way for them and tell them to watch out for some of the twists and turns.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Welcome back to Independence.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you around again. I've known you since
Since I was in high school.
yeah, since late high school and community college and stuff like that, and so that's
What we then called JUCO.
well, yes, and called it a few other things too. Robert Wullenscheider, Bob, retired in Independence, but not retired from activity. Thanks for being with us on the
Thanks,
show.
Jim.
Enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Reflections.